Riftbound's third set, Unleashed, is pretty much here, and with it the meta will face drastic changes. For both Origins and Spiritforged, China had access to the cards quite a bit before the rest of the world, leading to a fairly pre-developed meta. For this set though, while they did get the cards a little bit earlier, it hasn't really been that long, and there hasn't really been a large tournament like a Regionals, which will be leaving the meta still in flux. Things are changing every day, and it's hard to say what will end up on top, but I wanted to take a look at 5 decks that have been performing well both in the Chinese City Challenges and a few online Western tournaments. These are by no means the best 5 decks in the format. These are just 5 decks that you should consider playing and things that you can have built ready for day 1. There are no promises that these decks will be good upon their official release, but if you're in a rush to build something, consider checking these out and maybe you can have some fun at your Nexus Nights. The first deck that we're looking at today is one that many people are talking about with LeBlanc. This deck is one of the most interesting builds in the game, and while players are torn on how to properly play and build this legend, it remains one of the most fun and unique to play. By being able to make reflections, which are just temporary copies of your units, you can do some incredibly powerful and broken things, such as cheating out more death knells or bolstering your board. LeBlanc has been the talk of the town and is considered to be the deck to beat by many different players, but personally in my testing it has fallen a little bit short of these expectations. This is possibly due to the list not being fully refined, but it kind of feels like this deck has a few unbeatable hands and can perform really well on Windswept Hillock, but struggles in most other games. Only time will tell how LB will fare, but I definitely suggest playing it if you have the cards. It is genuinely so much fun. It is different than any other deck in Riftbound, and you should take advantage of that while you can. The list we're looking at opts for blue LeBlanc in the Chosen Champion Zone, which turns off your temporary effects while it's at the same battlefield. This means that sprites or reflections won't die at the start of your turn as long as a blue LeBlanc is there. This list also makes use of Baited Hook, allowing for earlier swing turns in conjunction with cards such as Galio or even just your reflections. If you like gambling, the Baited Hook list is probably the one for you. LeBlanc typically ends up in one of 2 camps right now: Death Rattle Karthus lists or the Baited Hook Gotcha lists. The Hook list also features the new card, Rift Herald, which League of Legends players probably have a little bit of trauma about, allowing you to draw more threats and develop them faster than intended, giving you access to a near endless swarm of units and just general pressure that you can develop. I'd be remiss to not talk about some form of Aurora slop archetype, as many players have begun to call it the best deck in format. This is especially true following its impressive showing at the TCG Arena 2K, where it claimed 5 out of 8 of the top 8 slots. Thanks to Elder Dragon, your Aurora turn has the potential to now wipe the board, or at least thin it out, giving you access to stronger board swings. If we compare this to Set 1 Aurora, where Dead Plume Predator was the largest swing, things might have gotten a little bit out of hand. While many early lists have opted to run Baron alongside the Mind Splitter and Elder package, I personally would advise against it. If Baron is ever the first unit you flip from your Dazzling Aurora, you often are too susceptible to the wide board your opponent might already have, and your opponent's gear removal from Aurora, which Mind Splitter could have hit. Baron is wacky fun, but it sort of feels like a win more card as well as a lose more card in a lot of different situations, and we should really aim to stabilize and remove that variance. In general, the deck plays out pretty much as you'd expect, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You're going to spend your early turns attempting to find Aurora and ramping into it. Later turns, you'll carefully navigate your opponent's removal, such as unchecked power, while slowly closing out the game. Be mindful of what threats you have left, and attribute your resources as needed. Aurora mirrors, surprisingly, can be fairly interesting, however, as often the first person to summon Elder Drake from Dazzling Aurora will be completely blown out by the second player's Elder Drake. It's important to find ways to interact with their hand and board that are a little bit creative so that you're fully aware of what threats you're running into and what threats you're leaving hanging. As much as the mirror might feel like you just walked into a casino at times, there can be a lot of intricate decisions to be made. Now, for those of you that do not want to play Aurora slop like myself, I have something a bit more low to the ground. Azir is an archetype that hasn't really changed that much, but has been given a lot of new powerful tools. The deck continues to swarm the board with sand soldiers that can be overstated thanks to gear such as BF Sword, and also has redevelopment plans thanks to Arise. Additionally, Azir gained access to 2 really powerful new tools with Soul Sword, allowing you to have yet another 1-mana weapon, and Sacrifice, which can be used to cycle off our sand soldiers, whether it be in desperation or in response to an opponent's play. This card is actually insane. Drawing 2 and channeling an Exhausted Rune is so crazy for the cost of this card. Azir is becoming more and more consistent and seems to be one of the big winners from the Spiritforged leaders, alongside the likes of both Sivir and Irelia. There isn't much to say, but your general game plan remains the same. and in theory, Azir should have an okay matchup into Aurora decks, but only time will tell if Shurima will prevail. Next on the list is something a little bit more spicy. Often when you think of Ornn decks, you're looking at something slower that is focused on holding with large threats, such as Ornn and Tiana Crownguard. Currently though, something a bit more unique has cropped up in the form of an aggressive Ornn. This deck makes use of the Rat Pit Crew to snowball the game early, using Ornn's legend effects to both cheat out gear and cheat out equips with these gear. You can make use of things like Brutalizer on your Scuttle Crab or Pit Crew earlier than you would normally want to due to the free gear power, meaning you don't have to deramp. Cards such as Premonition and Consult the Past allow you to cycle aggressively, leaving you to pretty much never run out of gear. You also get to make use of Sprite Fountain, which is one of the most impactful cards in the set, which essentially allows you to generate a sprite for 2 back-to-back turns at no power cost thanks to Ornn's legend ability. As you aggressively score into the later stages of the game, you have a few options to close it out, such as sticking a bunch of gear like Spellsong Ear on one unit, or developing a large Ornn, or maybe just sneaking in a cheeky Time Orb to catch your opponent off guard. While this deck will likely get a lot worse once the meta is refined, it is certainly a very, very fun one and can catch people incredibly off guard. Consider bringing this to your Nexus Nights while it's feasible, and just have some fun hitting people with Ornn. The last deck that we'll be looking at today is Diana. This is one of the clear winners from Set 3, and I expect to see it holding amazing results throughout the set's tournaments. Similar in a lot of ways to Ezreal, this archetype tends to fall in either the tempo-based shell or a more control-heavy one. Both builds can make strong use of Diana's Scorn of the Moon's legend ability to grant yourself 1 energy in showdowns, which allows you to not only cheat out more spells than you should be able to, but also can catch opponents off guard with what is feasibly in your range. Additionally, the champion unit, Diana Lunari, can pop off in games where it goes unchecked, granting you a ton of cycle that most decks struggle to achieve with several cards, whereas you can generate it solely through your chosen champion. Other notable cards are both Vex Apathetic, which will stun units and prevent movement the turn that these cards are played, as long as Vex is at a battlefield, and Hui, which is a Stealth Corn Herder on crack, giving you access to an insane amount of cycle and general flexibility. Additionally, Moonfall, Diana's signature spell, can drastically turn the tides of games by not only neutering your opponent's board, but also charming a unit into said battlefield, giving you access to their base, which can be fairly hard to come by. Finally, Starcrossed sits comfortably in this deck, which can be both an answer to large sticky threats from your opponent, or even just a response to removal or cards such as Elder Dragon. Current analysts run the problem of Chinese decklists being filled to the brim with one-ofs, making things a little bit less consistent, but I swear some version of Diana will be good, so buy your overnumbers while you can and get ahead of the curve, as this will be a somewhat hard deck to pilot. This is not financial advice though. Do not quote me on that. Do not buy an overnumbered if you do not want the overnumbered. You do you. The Riftbound meta is going to enter a very interesting place. Well, so far it seems like the top decks will be very Aurora heavy, and the rest of the decks will need to be Aurora answers. Time will tell how this will develop. Aurora also benefits from somewhat being auto-build, with the majority of the cards in the list being necessities with not much room for change, whereas other archetypes will take more time to be refined. As such, we might see a large meta shift in a few weeks, but hey, maybe I'm wrong and just coping, and I just don't want to be flipping Aurora cards every game, so hopefully I am right, and hopefully Aurora falls out of favor. I hope you enjoyed this look at different decks that you can play early on in the Unleashed meta. If you did, consider subscribing. I'll have more videos out soon.